What is up guys, Blue Spooky here. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you end up enjoying this video, doing any of those helps the video to do well and the channel to do well, and ensures I can continue making this content daily for many years to come. If you guys have any thoughts about the video, please be sure to share them in the comments below, as I always read all of them, even if I don't always get the chance to respond to them all. Last but not least, if you guys would like to support the channel further than you already do just by watching, liking, subscribing, and all that, please be sure to check out the join button somewhere around the subscribe button. If you click on that, it will let you join the channel membership for as low as $2 a month, and you get special access to emoticons you can use when you comment, and special icons that appear next to your name as well. No content will ever be locked behind the paywall, it's just something extra you can do if you'd like to support the channel further. Without further ado though guys, we'll get right into the stories, and I hope you guys enjoy them. Have a great day. This story happened when I was a junior in high school. I, a woman, was a friendly and curious person. 1 month into the fall semester, we got this new transfer student. He looked kinda nervous, seated right behind me. His name was Joe. I, of course, introduced myself to him, trying to ease the tension a bit. I showed him what we had learned so far, and helped him to look over his class schedule. We had 2 classes and lunch period together. Naturally, we got to know each other and became friends. He was a quiet kid, but talked a lot around me. I assumed he was just kind of comfortable around me. I made it very clear we were just friends, and he agreed. We started hanging out with my friends together. Now, fast forward to spring break. I told Joe I was going out of town with my family. He seemed disappointed we couldn't spend the break together, but he thought that was understandable. At some point though, I ran into Joe in a restaurant. I hadn't told him where I was going, so I thought to myself, wow, what a coincidence. He said his family was visiting the same town. Now, moving on to senior year, Joe and I hung out at least once a week. That then turned into 2 and then into 3. I noticed we were starting to spend too much time together. I wanted to make time for my other friends too. And that's when things started to change. I ran into Joe, or should I say saw him out of the corner in my eye, whenever I would spend time with someone else, or by myself. He started to become very obsessive and clingy. The first 2 to 3 times I didn't really think that much of it. It all became much more clear, though, when I started to question him one time. He slipped up in that moment and accidentally said he'd followed me because he wanted to make sure I was safe. I felt real betrayed and creeped out. He apologized and asked for forgiveness, but I told him I didn't want to be friends anymore. Of course, he got angry and left. He didn't come to school for the next 2 to 3 days. My friends told me he'd harassed them for snitching on him. He came back to school at some point though, and we pretended we didn't know each other. On my walk home one day though, I heard Joe calling my name in a low and unfamiliar tone. He was nowhere to be seen when I looked around. I don't know why, but my gut told me to escape as fast as I could. I started running, and I kept running until I got home. I made sure every window and door was locked. I was convinced I was being paranoid at this point though. Then my phone started to light up. Joe called me over and over. I then heard him calling my name again from outside. He was in front of my house now, banging on the door. I called my dad and told him what was happening. I pleaded with Joe to stop banging. Everything went completely silent after 5 minutes, which felt like an eternity. The last things I heard from him were, "You'll always be my best friend." The issue was brought to the school, and he never showed up again. Now, 4 years have passed by. Just a few days ago, I got friend requests on 2 of my social medias. It was Joe. I blocked him and changed all my media names to something else. I don't even live in the same town, nor in the same country. I'm now on the other side of the world, but I still can't help but feel scared like 18-year-old me once again. I'm not the friendly person I once was, and I've become cautious around other people because of people like Joe. This story happened 3 years ago, around the time that COVID started. It was a while back, but still worthy of a share, I think. It was early 2020. I had just gotten a new job in a small town near my area. I was looking for a place to live, and my sister offered to rent her house to me. She had bought the house 2 years prior, but she and her husband didn't really take to it. Their commute to work was long, so they moved away, and the house was left uninhabited. Luckily for me, it was actually really close to my own workplace. My sister pretty much offered to rent it out to me for free. All I had to do was pay for the water and electricity, and look after the house as well. I had been living there for a solid 2 or 3 months, and had already gotten used to it. One night, after coming back from work and parking my car, as I started to walk towards the door, I noticed something a bit odd. There was a cigarette butt on the curb to my house. I leaned down and picked it up to observe it, thinking that maybe it had been mine since I was a smoker. After looking at the brand, though, I realized it was not, and I threw it away properly. I didn't really think that much of it, and shrugged it off as some asshole throwing their trash at my curb. I went on with my night, and nothing unusual really happened. 2 days later, I was once again walking to my house when I spotted more cigarette butts, this time in the area of my porch instead. Needless to say, I was pretty damn pissed off at the thought of someone sitting on my porch, smoking and throwing their trash there, but since I didn't know who it was, there wasn't really anything I could do about it. I noticed that they had been put out pretty recently, so whoever it was had probably walked off when they saw me approaching. That night, I was watching a movie on my laptop, and it was pretty late, past 1 a.m. I was surprised when I heard a car passing by. It's a suburban neighborhood during COVID, so people rarely ventured out at night. I didn't put that much thought into it, though. Around a half hour later, I was very surprised when I heard some chatting nearby. I listened in, but I couldn't quite hear what they were talking about, as their voices seemed almost muffled and quiet. By this point, I was getting a bit unnerved, so I stopped the movie and quietly got off my sofa. I walked over to the front door to make sure it was locked. As I was approaching the door, I froze mid-step as I heard the two outside approaching my porch and reducing their talking to a low whisper. I realized right away that whoever this was about to break in. I leaned against my front door and waited, expecting a loud bang against it or for the doorknob to be shaken, but instead it was now oddly quiet outside. I decided to walk over to my window to see if maybe they had walked away or changed their mind perhaps. My windows have bars from the inside out that you have to unlock so you can move the curtains or look out the window comfortably. I unlocked the bar mechanism and lifted it up. I moved the curtains and was taken aback when I saw that leaning up against my window was a man. He must have been as startled as I was, because he basically tripped over his own feet as he jumped backwards. He tightened his hoodie to cover his face. All I could see was his big blue eyes looking at me. His friend realized what was going on and immediately started to kick the door in. He kicked it a solid 4 or 5 times, but the door refused to budge. The whole time I was staring at them, frozen in fear and trying to comprehend the situation. I snapped out of it and slammed the bars back over my window, locking them and running upstairs to the storage room, where I pushed a table in front of the door and called the cops. As I listened, I expected the two to come inside at any minute. I heard a loud crash and the bars from the windows being shaken aggressively. When they realized they couldn't get in that way, one of them let out a long, angry scream that probably woke up half the neighborhood. By the time the cops arrived, of course, they were long gone. The police couldn't find out who it was, but they were more active in the neighborhood in the following weeks. Regardless, I was not keen on staying there anymore, so shortly after I moved out. My sister sold the house a few months later, and as far as I know, nothing similar ever happened since. I honestly don't know what they wanted or why they were so determined to get in that night. I would like to share an encounter of mine. This happened a few weeks ago. I'm a 14-year-old girl in Kentucky. I was homesick with my older sister, who's 17 years old. We had just met back up with our mom, and we wanted to go for a walk. We go for walks all the time, so she didn't really think twice about allowing us to do so. Now, we do live in a bad neighborhood where some of the people can be very creepy. We were just walking along when we reached the mailboxes. The mailboxes in the place I live are at the end of the road. We always see people getting the mail, so when we saw this man, we didn't really think twice about it. We cut through the mailbox area and kept walking. Now, I was not really sick, but I didn't like to go to school. I'm sure that many other kids that age have tried to fake illnesses to get out of school. We were walking and talking about school and friends. That's when we heard a man yell from behind us, "Hey!" We turned to see a gardener trying to stop a man that was running in the same direction as us. My sister said maybe he's just going the same way and shook it off. I was wearing shoes, but she was not. We kept walking until she stepped on a piece of glass and it got stuck in her foot. To our dismay, this man used that opportunity to start chasing after us. He realized she was hurt. He didn't act the way a person would when they were trying to help, more like he was trying to pounce on prey. We tried to keep an eye on him, but pretend like we were not really paying attention. He was starting to get really close now. I asked out loud to my sister to make sure he could hear me, if Dad would be by soon. It took a few seconds for my sister to catch on, but when she did, she replied he would be there in a few seconds. When the man heard this, he quickly walked past like nothing had happened. He ran out of eyesight soon after. We got home as quickly as possible. We pulled the piece of glass out and stuck a band-aid on my sister's foot once we arrived. I wonder what that man was thinking, why he looked so strange and suspicious. Honestly, I didn't think I would see him again, but I have every so often. This man is always either behind us or ahead of us on the sidewalk, and every time I notice he's staring right at us. I don't know what he wants exactly, but to that creepy bastard who keeps following me and my sister, I hope we never have another encounter. Almost a year ago, I, 24 and male, was fresh out of college. I had just moved into an apartment with my middle school bestie, 23 and female, and her fiancé, 25 and male. This was after a long period of not having seen her in person. My bestie and I had a long and great relationship with few rocky periods. I didn't really know the fiancé that well, but I had met him a couple of times. He came off as occasionally kind of rude and loud, but mostly a very nice guy. I let a lot of little annoying behavior slide though, because she was so in love with him. Really, all I wanted was to spend some time with my best friend. Over the course of a few months, I slowly discovered though that she was trapped in an abusive relationship, with the most classic example of a malignant narcissist imaginable. Their fights, really just him screaming at her while she cried, escalated to the point where he was completely trashing the apartment, breaking her phone and laptop, hiding her car keys, blocking the door, and grabbing her so hard she had bruises. All the while hurling the worst insults he could fathom at the top of his lungs for hours. This man was about a foot taller and 100 pounds heavier than me, so there was nothing I could really do other than give her a ride somewhere else away from him until the next day. He didn't like it whenever I did that. Once it reached the point of physical harm against her, though, I put my foot down anyway and demanded he move out or I would call the police. He was not technically signed on to the lease, so I could kick him out at any time. He begged me for time to find a new place. He was extremely drunk and high the night he hurt her, and promised to stay sober until he moved away. Not wanting to escalate things, I agreed on the condition nothing like that ever happened again. My friend and her fiancé broke up soon after. 3 weeks passed by and everything was going pretty great. Ex-fiancé had found a new place and was in training for a new job. While still loud and inconsiderate, he hadn't really caused any problems so far. I get ready for bed early. I had an important meeting early the next day. I put on some comfy pajamas usually and lock my door before I change, out of habit. My bestie was out working, and it was just me upstairs in bed. The ex-fiancé was downstairs yelling on the phone about something. I tuned him out and tried to go to sleep. He was going to be moving out next week anyway. My chest rattled, though, from the booming footfalls coming up the stairs to my room, which woke me up from my sleep. My eyes snapped open to see my bedroom doorknob rattling back and forth. Locked. He let out a yell of pure malice and banged on my door. He screamed my name. The words were so slurred he sounded like he was trying to impersonate a lizard man. The hinges weren't looking so good. We lived in a crappy, cheap apartment with thin doors. I had to do something before he broke the door open, right? I said the only thing I could think of in that moment. What the f***? Suddenly, the banging and screaming stopped, and the doorknob fell still. After a terrifying moment of silence, he said as flatly as possible, "Open the door, bud. Just come and open the door." I still laugh about that one. Like, after all that, I just walk over and open up for him. Instead, I grabbed my essentials and jumped out the window. I was on the second floor, but we also lived on a hilly slope, so the fall wasn't quite that high. I still managed to fall wrong, though, and hurt my ankle. I hobbled away as quickly as I could to my car and peeled out of there. I immediately called up my best friend and warned her not to return home. We made plans for her to stay with a friend after she got off work. I made it to the friend's house and passed out for a few hours. I woke up to a call from my bestie. He'd traveled all the way to her workplace with a knife and broken in. He assaulted her and held the knife up to her special needs client's throat, said he'd kill him right in front of her. Thank God a coworker overheard everything from another room and was able to call the police in time for everyone to come out alive. My bestie also said he was on the phone with her while he was banging on the door. He said his goal for the night was to kill me and make her listen. I was totally alone in the apartment with him, sleeping upstairs in my bed. If I hadn't locked my door that night, would I even still be alive? If I had left my car keys downstairs, would I have been able to get away? When I returned to my apartment the next morning, my bedroom door had been completely kicked in. My belongings were scattered everywhere, and the large butcher knives were missing from the kitchen, instead sitting in the corner of the hallway to my room. This happened when I was a university student back in 1990. I was living alone in Tokyo. Let me set the scene for you. I had a nice part-time job close to a train station. My commute to university was from this very same station as well. I loved the area I was living and working in. There was one slight drawback with my new neighborhood, though: the route home from work to my apartment. If you take the normal highway road, you have to walk up this big hill, and it takes ages to get home this way. Usually, I have to take a shortcut through a park. You have to walk down this narrow, winding road by the station, past this temple to get to the entrance. Along this winding road, there are concrete walls on the left-hand side. The temple is off to the right, and there's also a cemetery in that area. After walking a couple minutes down this path, you come to an area packed with trees surrounding you. That's where the actual park area is. As you go in, you see the sand pit, some swings, the usual stuff. As you continue onward, the trees start to get thicker and thicker. There's an old dormitory for nurses in training on the right as well. The entrance to this dormitory cannot be accessed from the park, and it's all boarded up now anyway. That building's veranda faces the park area. If you continue, you'll reach some stairs, then there's a plaza. It ends with a forked road where you can finally exit. If you turn right, you'll find a shrine, but if you go straight, you'll end up on the main road, which is where my apartment is nearby. Anyway, now that you know how the area looks, back to the main story. Anyway, this happened on a cold November night. That day was a heavily raining night. Rain had begun to fall in the afternoon. I had classes and work that day. As soon as I finished class, the downpour really began in earnest. I went to work as usual, moving through the crowd, clutching my compact umbrella. It was still raining pretty hard when I finished work at midnight. In fact, because the rain was so heavy and the winds were so strong, I thought my compact umbrella might not be able to carry me home. I decided to borrow a bigger one from work. We kept umbrellas at work for the customers in case it rained, but surely they wouldn't mind me taking one. I remember how dark and cold it was as I was walking down the winding road. The streetlights seemed to be out this day, so it was much darker than it usually was. I really wanted to get home as quickly as possible. I could barely even see where I was going. I was staggering against the insane wind and the rain. Eventually, I got up the stairs to the plaza area. From the light of the public restrooms, I could see a bench. The toilet area was well lit and had a narrow entrance. Because I took this shortcut home so often, I got used to passing people in the park around this point. Since it was raining though, I thought I'd never see anyone, especially at this time of night. I was wrong though. As I looked ahead, there was someone there. A woman in red sat on the park bench. She was hiding her face in the crook of her elbow and had her knees pressed up against her chest. She didn't seem to have an umbrella. She was soaked and seriously dripping wet. I was stunned for a moment. I didn't feel like it would be right to just walk past and leave her there. I called out to her, "Hey, are you all right?" There was no reply. I put the umbrella from work down on the bench beside her and said, "I have another umbrella myself, so please use this one if you don't have one." I walked off quickly. There was something about this woman that was really creeping me out. On the way home, I was obviously worried for her though. I wished I had my mobile phone with me to contact the police or something. As soon as I'd thought about it though, I remembered I'd left it at work to charge. It was Thursday, and my working schedule was Monday to Thursday, so I really had to go back to work to go get it. I couldn't just leave it there for all my days off. I felt a bit stupid for forgetting it in the first place. At least though I could check on the woman on the bench while I was at it, since I would be walking back that way. When I reached the bench in the park again, the woman seemed to be gone. I jogged through the park towards the station in an attempt to see if I could find her, but I couldn't see her anywhere. Perhaps she was feeling better and decided to leave. I made it back to work and grabbed my phone. I was absolutely freezing. I poured myself a cup of coffee and explained the situation with the umbrella to the manager. The manager wasn't really worried about that, but also found the situation with the woman to be very creepy. She pointed out to me that only a dumbass would walk that way home again and told me not to be dumb and get home safe. I didn't want to worry her too much. As I went for the exit, she called once more and told me not to be an idiot. I started to walk home, taking a different path than the park. When I got there, I dried off and dove straight into bed. I didn't even bother turning on the lights. I could feel myself drifting off. My room's layout was a bit unusual. As soon as you get inside, you have to go up the stairs to my single room. The doorbell intercom also comes with a camera, so when the doorbell rings, you can check who's there without going downstairs. All of a sudden, the doorbell rung. When I opened my bleary eyes, I looked into the camera and saw that woman from the park bench right there outside. I buried my face in my hands. She must have followed me the entire way. I didn't move. It was so strange when I think back to it. I just stared at the monitor. After about a minute or two, the monitor went back to standby. It does this if no one answers the door. Surely she must have gone away by now. It was silent for the next 30 minutes or so. I started to unclench and relax. At this point, my phone began to ring. I was thankful to have someone to talk to. I grabbed my phone, and on the other end was the manager. I told her the woman who I lent the umbrella to was now outside my house trying to get me to let her in. I could tell my manager was worried for me. She asked if I wanted her to come over and pick me up. I heard the strange woman scream outside. Then, all of a sudden, it was over. I didn't hear anything else for the rest of the night. A week or two passed by, and I was constantly looking over my shoulder. There were no other strange incidences, though. That was until my manager and I were working together late one night. Suddenly, we heard something hit the glass window of the storefront. There she was outside, soaking wet once again, the woman from the park bench. We both screamed and briefly glanced at each other. In that short moment, somehow she disappeared again. She left behind a broken umbrella in the doorway. I moved apartments pretty quickly after that, but I kept the part-time job, doing so until I graduated from university. I still go back to my workplace sometimes as a customer, but there's been nothing further to report about the woman. Whenever me and the manager get together and the drinks are flowing, we always talk about the story of that night. In June of this year, I moved out of my parents' apartment, as I'd finally gotten a steady job. I longed for some sort of freedom, so I looked for apartments that were affordable in my city. I found one that was a 2 or 3 minute walk away from my parents' place. To me, that was perfect. I'd get to live alone, and my parents would still be nearby, so I could visit them whenever I wanted, or pop in to have breakfast with them. The apartment itself was great. Not really much to look at, but for a single man, it was more than enough. My apartment had this long corridor connecting each room together from the sides, with my front door being at the very start of the corridor. My bedroom was the second room on the left, but since the walls were pretty thin, you could pretty much hear literally anyone in the apartment complex. You could hear them walking, talking, anything from my bedroom, or really any room from that matter. Last week, I came home from the pub after meeting up with a few friends. It wasn't really that late, surprisingly, only around 10 o'clock or so. I had the day off, so I took a quick shower and hopped into bed to watch some Netflix. It was probably around midnight or so when I heard a faint knock coming from the front door. I stopped the show that I was watching and listened in for a minute or so. At first, I just thought it was my mind playing tricks on me. I continued to watch Netflix when, once again, I heard a 2-motion knock at my door. I got up from my bed and walked slowly over to the door. I looked out through the peephole and sure enough, it was pitch black out there, nobody in sight. I once again shrugged it off and went back to my room, but before I could even sit down properly, I heard a slightly louder double knock. At this point, I thought it must have been a friend playing a prank on me, so I called my friend and asked if he was knocking at my door. If he was, it wasn't exactly amusing. He paused for a second and said, "Dude, I'm at home. I have to be up at like 7:30 tomorrow. I believed him and hung up the phone. I was talking pretty loudly, so whoever was knocking had probably heard me. As soon as I hung up, I heard another set of knocks. At this point, I was getting pretty pissed off, so I walked to the door and looked out through the peephole again. I again saw nothing there. I then unlocked the door and took a quick peek out. I still didn't see anyone. I closed the door and locked it. I was so angry though, and combined with being a little bit intoxicated, I decided to wait and catch whoever was doing this. I spent a solid 10 minutes just standing there silently, looking out through the peephole. I was a little bit startled when all of a sudden someone put their hand right over the top of it and knocked again. I immediately started unlocking the door and sprinted out to the apartment hall. I heard someone booking it down the steps and heard them lean against the wall as their jacket brushed up against it. I ran down a few more steps before realizing that whoever this was likely waiting around the corner and trying to get the jump on me. I hurried back inside and called the cops instead. They were there within just a few minutes. They scanned the building and the street but couldn't find anyone. They told me it could have just been some kids pulling a prank and to never chase after someone. They kept a patrol car around the entire night, and the knocking stopped as well. It could have been some kids being dumb, sure, but the part that really gave me the creeps was the fact that whoever this was ran down the stairs and hid behind the corner. They didn't keep running away. If they were some pranksters, I find it more likely they would have just booked it outside. All that said, it's been a week and the knocking has since stopped. It's kept me on edge for a few days though, because I always expect to be jumped by someone when walking into my apartment now. So far, nothing has come of it though. This happened about 2 weeks ago, and was honestly one of the most scary situations I've ever been through. Here goes. My mom and I decided to go grab a bite at one of my favorite Korean restaurants. We also decided to bring along my 2-year-old sister and my 4-month-old baby brother. Once we were done eating, as usual, we always went to the park right after to spend some time outside and make sure my sister had some sort of outside activity. We went to the nearby park that had a lake. Honestly, I'm a very cautious person. I wanted to make sure the park was nice and safe. The first 20 minutes were okay and fairly normal. I was just taking a few pictures of the scenery near the dock. I headed back to watch my sister as my mom looked around the area. As we were done and leaving, my mom was putting the baby back inside the car seat. In the middle of the parking lot, I saw a bunch of seagulls gathering together. I wanted my sister to be a safe distance near them so I could take a few pictures. As I was taking those photos though, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a man walking towards me. I didn't really think that much of it. I thought he would just walk by as people usually do. I shrugged it off until he walked right up to me. We were about 3 or 4 feet apart, and he was mumbling something to me. Something about catching a bus, I thought. At first, I wasn't scared at all. I answered him politely until he started asking me the same question over and over again. I kept answering him the same way. "I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about." At this point, my heart was jumping, and I knew something was off with this guy. I couldn't even bring myself to make total eye contact with this weirdo. He kept asking something about the bus, but he was mumbling it in such a way I couldn't really understand. He started to walk even closer towards me. Freaked out, I took a step back and took a look at my sister, who was a little ways behind me, a further distance away. She was playing, not even paying attention. I panicked and screamed my mom's name. The man was still walking towards me. I started to speed walk over to my sister to grab her. My mom screamed my name out loud. She told me later she did it to make sure the guy knew I was not alone. For some reason though, this guy did not hesitate at all. Instead, he started going straight towards my mom. Now I was even more scared. I didn't want this guy to hurt any of us. I picked up my sister and quickly headed towards my mom. I saw that he was now standing in front of her. She was getting her wallet out and handing him a few dollars. I noticed as my mom was getting her money out, though, that the man was still mumbling something, but now no words were coming out of his mouth. He was moving it as if he was saying something to my mom, but there was complete silence. His lips started moving really quickly, and he started to quiver in place. After he snatched the dollars from my mom's hand, he ran away into the distance. I couldn't help but feel a large sense of relief. We all got into the car, and I talked to her right away. "What do you think? Was that man on drugs or something?" My mom answered me and said he must be a crazy homeless man. She said he'd told her he needed to catch a bus because his family lived up in Minnesota. We were quite far away from where he was saying he needed to go. As we were leaving, we left the direction the man ran in. We looked out the window, but he was nowhere to be seen. A couple of days later, I was looking through the photos I'd taken at the park when I noticed that in the photos I was taking of my sister with the seagulls, 2 of these photos actually contained the man, hiding nearby behind trees and bushes. I felt a bit uneasy, though now I know I most likely won't ever see that man again. I just hope I, and all my family for that matter, never have to go through another experience like that. So I moved into a duplex with my ex about 3 years ago in what we thought was a safer part of the city. One of our neighbors, Amber, works in the duplex rental office, and her husband, Ed, was at the time fresh out of prison. Later, we would see all of the swastika tattoos he had. He had been doing and continued to do landscape work for the rentals, like mowing the lawns, cutting down trees, etc. Other than that, he was home mostly doing odds and ends things, like tinkering with his lawnmower or out working on his truck or something. They both appeared to be very nice people, very kind and loving towards others, and always ready to offer to help out. We've smoked weed together a few times even. Ed smoked a lot more than Amber though. We talked about all kinds of things, so I really thought I could trust them and felt very safe being their neighbor. I once mentioned though how sometimes when I'm home alone, I hear these steps in the attic above my room and what sounded like a chair being dragged around. Sometimes the noise even appeared to follow me around the house. It always freaked me out, to the point of calling someone just to feel a little bit safer until the noises died down. At that point, Ed said, "What, you think we're spying on you?" It was in a laughing way, but it creeped me out a little how he went right to that. So then, I broke up with my boyfriend and he moved out. That was fairly recent, only about a few months ago. At that point, Ed started texting me often, asking me if I wanted to come over and smoke while Amber was still at work. I declined every time, finding different excuses. I just kind of felt uncomfortable around him. Then he asked if I wanted to have sex with him because he thought Amber was cheating on him. I definitely shut that down. Things were awkward as fuck, really. I didn't tell Amber because I didn't want to get kicked out or have some horrible awkward tension. I also hate confrontation, so I just kept quiet. That's about when I started to hear those noises in the attic above my room more often. It freaked me out even more when I woke up to a loud bang outside my front door at 3 a.m. When I went to examine it, there was a small lockpick outside my door on the ground, but no one around to be seen. I kept the lockpick, and the next day I texted a photo of it to Amber to let her know I thought someone had been creeping around my place. What she told me really surprised me. "Oh, that's Ed's. That's his ice pick, not a lockpick, sweetie. No one can pick your dead bolt with that." I know the difference between a skinny ice lockpick and an ice pick, though. I'm scared to be alone here, especially at night. Our attics connect together, and it's not outlandish to think he's been up there spying on me. I even looked around a little more closely and found a freshly drilled hole in the ceiling of my room. I just put wadded up paper into it and tried not to think about it. I honestly hope nothing else comes of this, and that I'm just being paranoid. For everyone saying to call the police, I don't really have any evidence. I have the lockpick still and pictures of my door being messed with, but whenever I go into the attic, it's been completely empty. I used to work as a haunted house technician at Busch Gardens in Williamsburg, Virginia. During the months of September and October, the park would put out an event called Howlo Scream. And the park transformed into a massive Halloween-themed experience with multiple uniquely themed attractions, such as vampires, zombies, and clowns. The haunted house I worked at was called Fear Fair, which consisted of a maze that branched in between several buildings and tents. I was there to maintain the maze and fix anything that broke over the course of the night. Sometimes the guests would punch our spooky decorations out of fear, or trip over each other and knock over some of the lights or something. It kept me pretty busy. While the maze was open, I would normally just linger out of sight, making adjustments to the audio and checking in with my coworkers on my walkie-talkie. One Saturday evening, there was a heavy downpour, which deterred much of our potential business. I used the downtime to work on the wooden frame that served as the entrance to the maze. I placed a sign across the line entrance stating the maze was temporarily closed, and then I started to get to work. After a few minutes, I left to go pick up another tool, which I needed from the maintenance area. When I got back, though, I noticed someone strolling around, walking down the tunnel deeper into the maze. It was a young man, maybe in his late teens, with a dark complexion. He had long braids and was wearing a dark blue tank top. The only way in was past the sign that said it was closed, so I was really irritated. Not only because he was trespassing, but because I had disassembled the part of the wall to work on it, and if anything happened to tip over or fall, he could have easily been hurt. I called out to him, "Sir, we're not open yet. Did you need help with something?" Up until that point, his back had been turned to me. When I called out, he visibly jumped in surprise. I couldn't help but think, geez, he's already freaked out and nothing's even turned on yet. He gave me the strangest look, though, like he was sizing me up. For half a moment, I thought he was going to try something, but instead he responded, "No, I just thought you were open." I explained to him that Fear Fair would reopen shortly after I finished with my repairs. He nodded and walked past me back out the entrance, not making eye contact with me. I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt and assumed he was just an impatient or hot-headed guy, and really wanted to take a look at that maze. After I was done assembling the entryway, I took the sign down and started to prepare the maze once more. The scare actors arrived on time and took their positions, but there wasn't very much business that night. The grounds were all soaked from the rain, and we probably had more employees than guests wandering around the attraction. Shortly after 9 p.m., I was getting ready to close things up for the night. It looked like it was about to start raining again. And that's when one of the actors walked up to me and took me aside. "Hey, I didn't want to say anything over the radio, but there's this weird guy with braids in the back corner behind the maze. I don't recognize him, and I don't know why he's there either." I immediately remembered that trespasser from before. I made my way to the back corridor. I turned all the back lights on and poked around any place I suspected a given intruder would have enough room to hide. I even peeked out the back exit and shined my flashlight all around, but I couldn't find the man. I locked the back door and then walked back through the maze, instructing all the scare actors that they could now leave. I turned off all the fog machines and switched on the overhead lights so I could get a better look around. It wasn't unusual for some drunken guests to wander out of the boundaries, but if this was the same guy I had seen before, I was worried he might be waiting. Perhaps he was stalking one of the actors or something. It doesn't really calm your nerves wandering through an empty maze filled with horrific life-sized mannequins of demon clowns. Somehow, being silent in there made it even worse, because then you start to question whether or not the faint sounds you are hearing are from your own imagination. After another 15 minutes, I decided the maze must truly be empty and started shutting off everything behind me as I made my way back towards the entrance. Just as I had switched off another set of lights behind a hidden circuit board, I heard footsteps coming loud and fast from behind me. They were coming from across the way, making a beeline straight towards me. In response, I turned on my flashlight and shined it in the direction of those footsteps. I saw it was the same guy from before, charging right at me with a prop mallet in hand. When my flashlight beam hit his face, though, he slowed down for a moment, clearly blinded. I took that opportunity to book it out of there. I knew the maze way better than this guy did. I could navigate it well enough to keep well ahead of him. Sure enough, I heard him cursing and bumping into things in the dark behind me. Once I exited through the opening of the maze, I waved down the security guys who covered the entrance until the police arrived. The local police were always on call nearby in case a fight broke out or someone was injured. They went into the maze without hesitation and emerged a short 5 minutes later with the guy in cuffs. He had surrendered peacefully. It looked almost as though he was relieved the entire thing was over. The police informed me this kind of thing was actually pretty common as part of a local gang's initiation ritual. The new recruit must sneak into a park, find a weapon and place to hide, and record themselves knocking somebody out. Then leave the park through the front gate like any other customer. That mallet may have only been a prop, but it was still made of solid wood. Had he brought it down on my head hard enough, it would have knocked me out cold or even worse. Had he not been so obvious with his attack pattern, I would have never seen it coming. After they took him away, the police swept the entire park and found 2 more young men hidden and waiting for an opportunity to strike someone. None of this ever made the local news. I suspect the park didn't want that kind of publicity. Ever since then, I've made it mandatory that any employees wandering through the attractions travel in pairs. My story starts in 2014, when I was 10 years old. I had just made a Gmail account, and it made me feel really grown up and mature. I'm thankful I didn't pick something stupid for the address, because I still use it to this day. With my Gmail account, I created a blog, on which I posted book reviews and recommendations. I was kind of a nerd when I was younger. I gave all my classmates the link to my new blog, and I knew every single person that engaged on it because their usernames were all some variation of their real name. One day, however, I received a comment on a post I made by a username I didn't recognize, PinkyPie_. They left very normal comments on my posts. I thought maybe it was also one of my classmates who decided to try out a different username. Honestly, it was a small incident, and I didn't really give it too much thought. Then, about 2 years later, in 2016, I made a Roblox YouTube channel, which I've long since deleted. Cringy, I know. I would record gameplay and post it onto my channel. I gained a whopping 18 subscribers or something, I think. One of those subscribers, though, the one that commented regularly on many of my videos, was called PinkyPie_. This kind of freaked me out, because I had made a completely new Gmail for this channel, and I had not told anyone about it. Roblox used to be my guilty pleasure, so I kept my channel a secret. I kept brushing off random appearances by this person, commenting on my videos, my blog, my friends' YouTube channels, even my mom's Facebook once, as coincidences. That was until 2019. I was either 14 or 15 when I made my first Reddit account. This was when I was in my K-pop era. I was a regular on r/K-pop and made news-like posts about happenings in the K-pop world. One day, I made a post like usual when I noted that one of the comments was from a user named PinkyPie_. The comment was a fairly mundane, typical Reddit thing, so nobody really questioned it or did anything about it, since it was relevant to what my post was talking about. I clearly remember feeling unnerved though, because this person had been showing up on every single social media account I ever created, ever since my very first email account. At this point, I reported that account and deleted my own Reddit. I still kept tabs on that account though. Now we jump to 2020. I was 16 years old and the pandemic had just started. At this time, I was kind of emo, angsty, and insecure, as most people are at least once in their lives. I had not made a TikTok account even though it was all the rage because of literally only one thing: fear of that person finding me once again. It was at this time I discovered 4chan, NSFW warning by the way. 4chan's complete anonymity and my strongest weapon, the Opera browser and its VPN, led me to believe I was 100% safe and protected, even if I was on a website that was basically full of the devil's spawn. I posted normal things mostly. Sometimes I would explore the NSFW side though, and mostly enjoyed talking to strangers on the internet. One day, I was feeling especially brave and horny, so I took 3 to 4 nudes of myself and posted one of them on /B. The post rose to the top because I mentioned I was Asian in the title, which I am, and obviously those guys went crazy over that. I lied about my real age and said I was 18. I shouldn't have done that, and I don't really know what I was thinking. I remember receiving between 400 to 500 replies on my thread. Not all of them were nice, but still, I got a lot of compliments, which really satisfied my ego and made me feel a little better about myself. As I was lurking over my thread though and reading these various comments, I noticed a comment from somebody named PinkyPie_. It was another generic comment related to the situation, but this one did not make me feel admired or appreciated. It made me feel sick to my stomach. That was my breaking point. I deleted that thread immediately, then went into a sort of paranoid delusional state. I deleted all of my social media accounts, powered off my phone, shut down my computer, and disconnected the Wi-Fi. I honestly felt like I was going insane. How could this person possibly be showing up literally everywhere I went online? By that time, it had been around 6 years since they'd first showed up. For a couple of years after, I took a break from every type of social media entirely. I got rid of my Instagram, my Snapchat, my Reddit, YouTube. I scanned through everything and made sure it was gone. If I wanted to go on a social media site, I would do it on a VPN and without signing in. This gave me a much-needed break from that person's account. I never did delete my Gmail since I used it for a lot of things though. What's odd is that while this guy had found me on every social media site I used, they never once directly tried to email me. I was 100% sure they must have had my email. For some reason, they just didn't choose to try to contact me. Finally, we get to 2023 and to the present times. Sometime in early January, I decided to make a Reddit account again and mostly just lurk. I posted and commented very little, and I received no comments from PinkyPie_. I believe the ordeal was finally over. In November, a few days before my 19th birthday, I went to Japan for my cousin's wedding. I decided to make a Reddit post on r/outfits of my wedding outfit because I really liked it and wanted people to see it. Guess who commented on it immediately? Well, to be honest, I don't know who it was. By the time I read the comment, the account that had written it had been deleted. What they wrote, though, is what shocked me. How is it in Japan, by the way? Liking it more than name of city where I lived? Name of the state where I live, USA? Once again, I was in hysterics. I was 99% sure it was the same guy. Somebody, even if it wasn't who I thought it was though, had somehow just doxed me on the internet. I reported the comment and the user, and once again deleted my post and my account. All I could really do was run. I really need to get this off my chest. I haven't really told a single soul. I feel unsafe all the time, and have paranoia-induced hallucinations occasionally. I can't explain to anyone why though. Everyone always tells me it's okay, that I'm being too dramatic, that they're not really bad people, they're just drunk. But parties with my family really ruined my childhood. My parents, especially my mother, really liked partying, seeing friends, getting drunk, and the whole package. Nothing special. Yeah, sure, everyone loves having a little fun sometimes, and I can fully understand that. Since I was little though, my mother always had a really close friend. He'd be around 55 now, I guess. He would always come home with his wife and they'd drink a whole lot. Sometimes he'd even do so much his wife would even be ashamed of him. He would get that bad. When all the family was wasted, my mom forced me to join in with them. We're having fun, come on, don't ruin the party. You're a pain in the ass, always complaining. What's the problem now? I was the one parenting all of them. I was protecting the dog because they would throw their empty bottles at her. They would pour beer in her bowl and make her drink it. I was warning them over and over because they were getting way too rowdy and drinking way too much. I basically had to babysit them all every time, even though I was only around 11 or 12 years old. One day, I was filming and having fun with my mom's friend. We were having a genuinely nice moment, to be honest. It was just me and him, and we were dancing. So far, there wasn't really anything weird in this situation. Then he stopped me though, and started to say things that scared me real bad. You know I could be your father, right? You're so young. Oh, do you remember when you were a child, and you said I was your lover? You said you were in love with me. I didn't know what to say. I felt terribly uncomfortable. He grabbed my butt and whispered in my ear. Oh, you say nothing when I do that, huh? That's not good. Then he just kept on dancing like nothing happened. I did get a recording of this, but I deleted it. I felt too ashamed in that moment. I was feeling stressed, ashamed, bad, scared. I wasn't hiding it either. My mom's friend sent me a message right after this. Are you mad at me? I felt intimidated. No, don't worry. I was about ready to just go to sleep. I told everyone goodbye when that fucking friend grabbed my head and tried to kiss me on the lips. After that, he would stare at me all day long. It was a nightmare. I didn't say anything. I waited for 2 years before speaking up. The first person I told was my dad. He looked desperate and sad, and then he just walked away without doing anything. I tried to tell my mom too. At first, I lied and said this had all happened to my best friend. She gave me the whole, he should tell his parents. That's awful. I hope he's doing better now. When I finally told her it happened to me though, she changed her mind immediately. What? He did that? He was drunk. He didn't mean to do that. Maybe he just touched your hair. Don't tell me he did that to you. He's my best friend. It was 2 years ago. I mean, he won't remember. Come on, it's nothing. I cried. I just couldn't deal with this anymore. Every time I tried to tell anyone something, I would never be taken seriously. Especially by my family. That's why I stopped telling them altogether and started to avoid them ever since. Maybe they're right, I don't know, but that's not the only thing that's happened since then. I can't even sit next to them during a party. I can't even look at them, simply because I'm so scared. I was only a child back then. My first job was at McDonald's. This building was attached to a gas station and located just off a busy highway. I was 14 and had all kinds of bad luck at this age. I started a 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift. This early, the store was usually empty, so only 3 people, myself included, were in the restaurant. The manager, who was in the back, and the cook, who was also in the back. I, the cashier, was up front. I was wiping down the counter when a man who looked to be in his mid-30s or early 40s came in. He didn't order anything though. Instead, he went straight to the restrooms, which were in the restaurant area just around the corner from my cash. Many truckers and travelers would come in simply to use the washrooms and leave, so this was not too uncommon an occurrence. I didn't really think much of it. After the man finished though, he walked up to the counter and said this. Excuse me, I was just in the washroom and one of the toilets is overflowing. I immediately came around the counter and let him lead me toward the restroom. Suddenly though, I got this terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach and stopped dead in my tracks. I became very aware that no one was in the restaurant area and the only other 2 people in the store were in the back. They would not be able to hear me if I went into the restroom. The man had the restroom door propped open and realized I had paused. "Come on in, I'll show ya." It came off innocently enough, but something was not sitting well with me. I smiled at him and said, "One moment, I'll get my manager." I started making my way back to the counter. "Come on, it'll only take a minute," he called out behind me. I met my manager in the back still and explained to him that a man was complaining about an overflowing toilet. My manager went to check it out, and I followed closely behind him. When we turned the corner though, the man was gone. We entered the restroom, and no such toilet was overflowing. We exchanged a look and never brought it up again. To this day, I feel like some divine intervention must have given me the wisdom to know not to follow that man into the restroom. The whole situation only lasted a few seconds, but it felt like forever. I was young and trusting, and this man could have done God knows what, and I wouldn't have been heard. He could have left and got away with whatever he had planned, and hit the highway right away. I never did see the man again after. I'm a 13-year-old male who currently lives in London, England. The story happened a few days ago, so it's quite fresh in my mind. My journey to school every day consists of a 30-minute bus ride and a 10-minute walk. It seemed like the days were getting darker and darker, so normally I like to walk with my friends to school. That day I was only with one friend though. Let's call him Kyle. Our walk to school consists of an alleyway, which after 10 minutes leads into a small wooded area with a path. It's a kind of strange little path, considering the moment you're out of it, it's just houses and a school. The path never really bothered me though, until this day. All of my other friends wanted to go to the store across from the start of the alley, so it was just me and Kyle. We began our journey that morning, and after about 2 minutes in, we saw a man standing next to a car on the right side of us. The window of the car was open, and the man seemed to have his hand in the car. Kyle whispered to me, "Is he trying to steal that thing?" I looked back to the man, and we immediately locked eyes. Kyle and I began to walk a little faster until we reached the wooded area. We felt a little better now and decided to slow down. That is, until we heard the sound of a twig snapping behind us. Now, I'm already a very paranoid person, so I have very quick reflexes. Almost instantly, I turned a full 360 around me to see what was making that noise. I couldn't see anything though. As I began to look a little more closely, I saw a figure moving from behind a tree. Kyle didn't really seem to care though, as he'd continued walking in the meantime. I caught up pretty quick, and I asked him, "Did you see that guy?" Kyle said, "What guy?" I brushed it off. Maybe I'd just seen shadows or something. We continued to walk onward until I felt a cold, uneasy feeling. I turned to check once again, but I didn't see anything. I couldn't stop observing though. I was looking around closely once again when I see a figure crouched down behind a bush. My parents have always warned me about stranger danger, so I immediately bolted. Kyle didn't have any idea what was going on, but he quickly followed me anyway. Stupidly, we went off the regular path. We started just running rapidly around in the woods. I grabbed up my phone, only to realize I'd forgotten to charge it the night before. I asked Kyle to take out his, but he'd left it at home apparently because it was broken. We heard footsteps behind us getting closer. I quickly looked around to a few bushes around us and picked one to hide in. I prayed to God as we jumped into it. Kyle looked to be on the verge of tears. We heard the sound of a phone ringing, and I heard someone pick it up and start talking. What I heard them say gives me chills to this day. "Why are you calling me right now? I've got exactly what you're looking for. Just meet me in the woods by such and such." Then he hung up. It took about 3 seconds for me to realize the reality of this situation. The footsteps got closer and closer. I closed my eyes, but then I heard it. "Hey, what are you doing?" I heard a voice call out, and twigs and leaves snapping and crunching rapidly. I looked up to see an older kid from school standing in front of us. I saw a man running away at a fast pace. I don't know what would have happened to Kyle and myself if this older kid hadn't followed us. I feel I learned a valuable lesson, though, to always be prepared for the worst. Recently, I had to make a quick run to Walmart after work for a few smaller items I'd forgotten the day before. About halfway through my trip, I was approached by a woman and a young girl who asked me to buy a pack of diapers for them. Now, I do enjoy helping people out however I can, but something felt incredibly off-putting about this situation. Something about the way she just strode right up to me and asked, almost as if it was very rehearsed. I told her I couldn't do so in the most polite way I could muster. She nodded and went on her own way. I was prepared to deal with potentially having turned away a woman who was genuinely in need of help. But like I mentioned, something still felt very weird about it. I completed the rest of my shopping and was well on my way to just forgetting the entire encounter. When I made my way up to the self-checkout though, suddenly the same lady and little girl appeared out of nowhere and made a beeline right for me. She didn't look at me or speak. She and the girl just started scanning not only the diapers but also items they had hidden in their clothes, racking up a huge total on the self-checkout. I was completely stupefied that she just brazenly assumed I'd pay for all of this. I got the attention of an associate nearby and quietly explained the situation. I wasn't trying to make a scene, but I simply didn't know these people, and I was not about to pay for so many of their belongings. Especially now that I knew it was all a ploy. He told me they'd had to deal with her before, and I wasn't the first customer she'd had a run-in with. He put on his most patient customer service voice and talked to the woman, at which point she pretended not to speak any English, despite having had a pretty firm grasp on it earlier when asking me to buy things for them. She kept pointing at me as if to indicate she and the girl were with me. Thankfully, she wasn't fooling the associate though, who by now had not only cleared her items from my checkout, but also placed himself between me and the woman. She was still pretending she couldn't understand him, and still adamant that we were together. She was getting louder, and things were starting to really escalate now. I made it a point to swiftly pay for my belongings, and hightailed it out of there. I hurried out to my car, closing the door just in time to see the little girl sprinting to catch up with me, the woman not far behind her. Panic set in, and suddenly I was trying to lock the doors, throw my groceries in, and buckle up all at once. The woman arrived and began frantically pounding on my window as I cranked the car, with what I assumed at first was her fist. It wasn't until I got a good look that I caught the sun gleaming off of something. I turned to find that she was hitting it with the tip of a switchblade, making deliberate slicing motions with it. Just about the only thing I could think to do was throw my car into reverse and get the hell out of there. As I did, she and the girl slowly walked in front of my car and started heading back toward the store. As she was walking by, though, the woman turned around and gave me what I can only describe as the most sinister smile I've ever seen. Something was deeply insidious about the way she gave me this knowing look, a truly diabolical version of the kind of look a mischievous kid would give you when they know they're doing something they're not supposed to. I was shaken, but ultimately okay in the end, though I'd be lying if I said I didn't look over my shoulder for a long while after. My friends and I live in the hills somewhere in Northern Ireland. Last year, the four of us were walking along the cliffs by the seaside, arguing about Conor McGregor or something, when my friend pointed out a row of power lines running up and away from the road, out further into the trees. Had we not been thrown out of the pub we normally frequented on the previous night, we probably would have just hit it right back to town for a drink. But given that we had nowhere better to be right now, we decided to try and find out where exactly these power lines led to. The area we were moving through was extremely rugged. The closest thing to a road that led between the trees was these two tracts of flattened ground where vehicles had clearly passed by before. We walked deeper and deeper into the woods, half concentrating on the power lines and half on those wheel marks, just making dull conversation and not really expecting to find anything interesting. That is, until the wheel marks just ended altogether. The power lines wound their way through the tree branches and kind of awkwardly placed across the limbs. I had never seen this sort of thing before. My buddy wandered a bit deeper into the trees and discovered a 6-foot-tall wire fence circled in a small clearing. Inside this fence was a 2-story stone house, sitting there and looking like a lost heirloom or something. We circled around the fence until we found the actual gate, which was just carelessly hanging open. We walked right up to the front door. Privacy and common sense were not present at the moment. The very first thing I noticed was that there were tons of security cameras mounted outside the home, pointing in all kinds of various directions. I considered what sort of person would go through all the trouble of setting up all these cameras and just leaving the gate wide open. It didn't end there, though. The front door was open as well. The four of us just walked right inside like we owned the place. I hesitated in the entryway, while my friends immediately split up to search around. I went to shut the door behind me when I spotted 4 deadbolts on the inside frame. Suddenly, I got the very strong feeling that we were all trespassing, and whoever owned the place would not be very happy to find us there. My friends found one of those metal detecting wands on the kitchen counter, like the ones you'd see TSA agents using in airports. In a back room, another friend found 2 backup generators. Despite them being there, it was obvious that power had not been working in this place for quite some time. The whole place just smelled musty, like the outside forest had invaded it with its cold, earthly scent. I asked if it was possible this was a secret military base of some kind. One of my friends pointed out, though, that there were no weapon cabinets and there hadn't been any checkpoints outside either. I wanted to leave right now, but the others decided they wanted to search upstairs, which turned out to be one giant room. There was a cot in the corner, but most of the room was occupied by a long table with chairs. There was a flat-screen TV mounted to the wall, which I presume was meant to view footage from the security cameras. While the other guys dug through the drawers looking for anything interesting, one of my friends started fidgeting with the flat screen, like he was going to take it down off the wall and carry it under his arms over the hills the whole way back to his own place. The whole time, though, I was waiting, disturbed by the steps, impatient and ready to leave at any moment. I was starting to get the sense that this place may be some very paranoid off-the-grid person's hideaway, and he may have left in a hurry for some reason. This house was very much hidden away. I can't imagine anyone would think to look in this area. I tried to just admire the view from the window and calm down. I could just make out the trees through the window. Then I turned to head back downstairs, and that's when I froze. There were these black marks like ash, staining the carpeted stairs about halfway down. Those definitely had not been there when we'd climbed the stairs earlier. I spoke aloud. "Whoa, what the hell?" Then the smell hit me. There was a burning fabric scent in the air that washed over me. I immediately panicked and started coughing. I immediately started rushing down the stairs, keeping as close to the sides as I could. I rushed right out the front door without looking back. My friends followed close behind, each of them making remarks about the sudden burning stench in the air. I asked if anyone had tracked in the ash on the stairs, but I already knew the answer. Not only had none of us tracked those marks across the carpet, but none of us had stopped at that halfway point to leave them. I suddenly had the horrific thought that someone else had been in the house with us the whole time. We immediately left the area and headed back to the coastline. Halfway back, we heard a sort of loud roar-like sound from behind us. It could have been an animal, sure, but to me it didn't sound like that. Instead, it sounded like someone's infuriated screams. I decided I didn't really want to be involved at all. A couple of my friends went back a few days later, though, and they told me there was a burned spot directly outside the entrance. When they sifted through the loose soil, they pulled out an entire Ouija board from the dirt. Sometime later, I talked with another friend of mine about it over a couple of beers. He told me he had heard some rumors that there was a group of psychotic people who lived out in those woods. Apparently, they believed in things like ancient curses and possession. They were known to be quite violent towards outsiders. I don't know what was going on in that house that day, but I feel like we were very lucky we didn't encounter whoever owned the home. Also, that we all made it out in one piece without any further incident. I was living in a flat share on the outskirts of a city, which is known for generally being very safe. A key is needed to enter the main building, but often the door isn't shut properly, and so doesn't lock. Not really a cause for concern for anyone in the building, as it's a very trusting neighborhood. It was around 2 a.m. or so, and I was laying in bed naked, completely sprawled out. At some point, someone opened my door and entered. I figured it was one of my flatmates going to the balcony. He would have to walk through my room to access it, so it was completely normal that someone might come in at this time of night. I had just smoked a spliff and it was 2 a.m., so I opted to ignore this person and pretend to be asleep. I could feel him just standing there, though, and I thought that maybe he was waiting for his girlfriend to join him or something, and maybe he was stood there checking his phone. No big deal. The person went out to the balcony. Took about 2 or 3 minutes. I figured it was definitely him. They were out there smoking a cigarette. They came back in and went back to standing there in total silence. I was half asleep though and didn't really think anything of it. The next morning, my flatmate told me that someone had broken in, came into my room, and went into the room of my flatmate as well. They'd gone through all of his things and gone out into the kitchen. Upon seeing my flatmate wake up from all the noise and come out to see what was going on, They quickly fled from the building. The only thing the person stole was my pair of Marshall headphones. We were all very confused as to why they only stole my headphones, as opposed to the money left on the table, or my flatmate's multiple cameras, for example. We spoke to our neighbors, of which there were around 15 in the building, and none of them had noticed anything out of the ordinary. They hadn't gone into any of the other apartments either. We know that most of the neighbors also don't lock their doors at night. For some reason, it sounds as if this person walked up 3 flights of stairs, ignoring all the other open apartments, with the sole intention of coming to ours. Given their attempt at stealth, it's unlikely they were intoxicated either, and it was not just a mistake. Nothing else really came of it though. The police said they'd keep an eye out, and I had to buy a new pair of headphones. It left me thinking, though, about what would have happened had I fully opened my eyes and alerted this person standing over me. Would they have hurt me? Would it have been a total stranger, or someone who I'd met before? I was attending a popular concert in the south side of Chicago last year. As most of you probably know, it's a pretty sketchy area down there, and the crime rate is pretty high. The tickets were really cheap though, and the concert was well populated, so I felt pretty safe. Plus, I decided to go with a couple of my friends. The concert itself was great, and we all really enjoyed ourselves. We knew the drive out, though, would be pretty bad, especially with all the traffic. It was almost 10 p.m. by the time we finally managed to get out of the parking lot and onto the main road. We realized pretty quickly, though, that we were going to be on this road for quite a while. The cars were barely even moving forward. Sitting there, my friends started to look up some other routes to get back to our town. They found one that could hopefully get us past all this traffic. After sitting basically in the same spot for 30 minutes, we agreed that we would try this other route. We turned off the main road as soon as we could and began going through the neighborhood streets. Surprisingly, there were a lot of people outside this late at night, either walking around or standing in their yards. That wasn't normal for where we lived, which was just a couple of hours west. As we continued down these neighborhood streets, we began to notice that the people outside were watching us as we drove by. We also started to realize that we hadn't seen any other cars in probably 20 minutes now. This got us all a little bit nervous, and we started to pay a bit more attention. I asked one of my friends to check where the nearest main road was. As he was scrolling through the map, my other friend pointed out a car at the end of the street we were on. It was parked sideways, blocking both lanes of the road. I stopped the car immediately and backed out, and got onto the road that we were on previously. We then continued down that way. We began to panic a little bit, trying to find a safe way to get out to a more public area with other cars around. A few seconds later, we again saw at the end of the road a sideways car blocking both lanes. I stopped the car and looked over at my friends. We were all looking at each other, clueless as to what to do. It was too dark and we couldn't tell if anyone was in the car up ahead. We didn't want to approach it. As we were discussing our options, 2 men came up from one of the houses off the street. One of them stood behind the car, and the other came up to my window. He signaled with his hands for me to roll it down. Nervously, I did so just a few inches. The man looked at each of us and scanned the inside of the car, then asked me where we were headed. "Just back to the highway," I said. He nodded and looked over at his friend, who started to walk over to the passenger side. There was a small moment where it felt like everything went silent and nobody moved. Suddenly, both men grabbed the doors, trying to open them repeatedly. I reacted as fast as I could by putting the car in reverse, as everyone started screaming. Just as I started to back out, the man tried to stick his arm in through the gap in the window. He even got stuck as I pulled the car back before slamming into the ground hard. I turned around and floored it out of the street and went back the way we'd come. We were all in total shock. I tried to stay calm, but I was shaking uncontrollably. We all agreed we would just go back the way we came and get on the highway from there. I think we were all pretty shaken by the situation, but I do think I handled that pretty well. Luckily, our doors were locked though, because I'm not sure we'd be here right now if they weren't. What is up guys, Blue Spooky here. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback for me as well, be sure to leave that in comments below the video. If you guys have a story you'd like to send in, or if you'd like to contact me for any reasons, there will be links to my social media in the description below the video, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has one, and how you'd like to be credited in the description below the video. Please make sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable with and try to use as much proper grammar as possible to make sure you have the highest chance of appearing in a future video. Overall, I think that's pretty much it for now guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.